Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Great Exhibition Road Festival Explore at Home series, a new online series of events where we're bringing the best of art and science from across South Kensington to your homes. My name is Holly, and I work at Imperial College London, which is one of the festival partners, and you'll be seeing me at the beginning and at the end of this workshop today. In this workshop, we're going to be making cheesecake from scratch, and yes, you will even be making your own cheese, all while learning the skills you need to be a great chef and scientist. And yes, there's a lot more in common in cooking with. There's a lot more in cooking between. Oh my God! Sorry, everyone. There's a lot more in common between cooking and science than you first might think. But I'll let the chemical kitchen team tell you all about that later. So just to remind you, this is an interactive event, so you're going to be making the cheese along with us. And if you get stuck at any point, you can pause, you can rewind, and you can begin again. Just make sure that you have all of your ingredients ready. So there's a link below to all of the ingredients and the equipment that you'll need in the chat. There's also going to be a link posted to a one-page recipe sheet, which you can have up and follow along with us if you'd like. And there's also going to be another link to a long kind of cookbook manual that you can download and print off and keep at home if you'd like to make this cheesecake again for your friends. So as it's a live event, our speakers are going to be coming to you and asking you questions, and you're going to be interactive, so make sure that you post them in the chat and we'll pass them on to them to answer. And just one last thing for me to remind you is to please be considerate of others in the chat. We will be removing anything that is explicit or offensive. So joining us today, I would like to introduce Jakob, who is a molecular biologist and a trained chef. He's now a culinary education designer at Imperial, and Luke, who is a synthetic chemist by training and is now a teaching fellow in the Department of Chemistry at Imperial. So I'll hand over to them and I'll see you at the end.
Okay, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're in. Really pleased to be here with you today for this Chemical Kitchen workshop as part of the Great Exhibition Road Festival. I'll be introducing a bit about what we do with the Chemical Kitchen project, and then Jakob will be coming into frame to take us through the cheese making process. But the Chemical Kitchen project, it's all about exploring cross-disciplinary learning. So essentially, for today, what we want to do is we want to immerse ourselves into the world of being a chef and look at the parallels between the work done by professionals in the world of gastronomy and those in the world of science, including chemistry. So we're looking for all these transferable skills found in both fields. So of course, chefs prepare for their work. They call it mise en place, meaning everything in its place. So you can see here we have some materials set out before us. Hopefully you've accessed now your little one-page scripts of the cheese making process, so you have an idea of the kinds of ingredients and equipment you'll need on hand, and Kuba will be talking a little bit more about this. And of course, chefs work in an organized way. They make precise measurements. They work carefully, practicing meticulous techniques. They plan their work. They analyze their results. These are all things that chemists do. And so we're going to be exploring those continuously throughout this workshop and highlighting those skills and where they're embedded within the work of a chef. So really lovely to be here. I'm now going to hand over to Kuba and really looking forward to being here with you for the next hour or so.
So hi, everybody. I'm Kuba or Jakub Radzikowski. Holly has introduced me, so I won't talk about this too much. But yes, Luke mentioned the term mise en place, and this term basically means everything in its place. And hopefully I have everything in the place to prepare the cheesecake base and to prepare the cheese. So if you see me running around, looking for things, then I haven't done my mise en place correctly. But hopefully it has been done correctly. So we're going to start with making the cheese, because it takes a little while to heat up the milk. So I'm just going to measure out 750 milliliters of milk, and that's just a good amount for the recipe we're doing, so there's not too much waste. Of course, you can scale it up or down any way you want. Usually I would, if I would do it at home, I would use 2 liters of milk or like, I think here it's 4 pints of milk. And the 4 pints of milk would create like a nice our of the cheese. We need a little bit less today because we're doing just like one small cheesecake. So has just measured the milk. I'm going to put it in our nice glass cooking pot. I'm going to put it directly on the heat. And while this is heating up, I'm going to crush some cookies. So this will be a very kind of traditional cheesecake base. I have some digestive biscuits in the pestle and mortar, very kind of laboratory equipment, but you can use a rolling pin or even a small pot and just kind of crush them, or spoon and a fork.
And so a quick question, Kuba, for our viewers. I mean, how many cookies do you actually have in the mortar there at the minute?
Right. So for what we are doing, I have exactly 3 cookies because again we're not doing too much, and 2 free cookies will be enough for actually 2 portions, because this dessert will have many components, and I guess you don't want too big of a portion and too much calories in one.
So it sounds like you may be able to make 2 tarts, one for yourself and one for someone special.
Exactly. So I'm just crushing them, and I'm not crushing it into like a flour, like powder. You can see that there are bigger pieces, and we want these bigger pieces because they will have a nice crunch, a little bit more texture, and texture is very important when you taste things. It's not only about how it tastes in terms of flavor, it's also about how it feels in the mouth. And I have a little bit of melted butter, so I just zapped it in the microwave for about 30 seconds, and this is going to be our glue. So I will add the butter to the cookies, and I will just mix them. And right now the butter is liquid because it's a little bit warm, but once it cools down, it will solidify it into like a solid cheesecake base that will support our cheesecake.
So I think this is a good point to do a little bit of a review. So we have our milk warming on the stove. So that's in a pot, warming up gently, and we're going to bring that essentially just to the brink of boiling. And I think one really important thing in science is the ability to improvise. So here in the chemical kitchen, we have a mortar and pestle that we use to crush the cookies. But I'm thinking about maybe some of our viewers at home who mightn't have that tool. We can think about many other ways to crush those cookies. Some people might give it a few pulses in a food processor, or even just mashing with a fork on a plate.
Yeah.
Anything you have to hand would be absolutely fine. And then I wondered if you could say a little bit, Kuba, about how you melted the butter.
Right. So the butter, I put it in a beaker. You can put it in a glass. You can put it in a coffee mug, and it was literally a tablespoon of butter. And I put it in the microwave and microwaved it for 30 seconds until it was fluid. If you want, you can also put it in a little pot and put it on your stove. That will melt it very well as well. And just to kind of maybe expand a little bit on the improvisation things, in professional kitchens, you don't have a mortar and pestle usually. You just take a rolling pin and you crush it with the rolling pin in a pot, in a metal pot, and it does a job that's as good as using a mortar and pestle. So now I have my kind of cookie mixture with the butter, and if I press it down, you can see, well, it sticks together. So we will do 2 different kind of assemblies of cheesecake. One will use a metal ring, and it will be a very kind of traditional looking cheesecake. The other one will be kind of more free form. But for the more traditional one, I'm just going to put a few spoons of the cookie crumbs with the butter in the ring. And this is still a little bit loose, so I have an improvised tool, which is basically a bent spoon. And this bent spoon I will use as a kind of plunger to push the cookies down and make sure that it's a solid base.
Some people also use the bottom of a glass or anything with a flat surface that can compact that. The key thing is to get a nice, dense, compacted layer of those cookie and butter mixture. We actually have we have quite a few people following us online. I think some people are using cow's milk, some people are using soy milk. And I wondered if you could just remind us, Kuba, of the difference of the volume of milk needed depending on which milk you were using.
So because you get more cheese out of soy milk, I would recommend that you use half a liter of soy milk only. And for the cow's milk, it was 750 milliliters. If you use goat's milk or any other milk, I'm not sure what's available, but goat's milk is definitely available. And you could use goat's milk, make goat's cheese. And that would be also 750 milliliters because it's quite similar to cow's milk in terms of how much cheese you have after the procedure. So just to show you, this is the cheesecake base, and now I can lift it and it will not fall out. So it's all compacted in the bottom. And now to solidify it, well, butter is solid when it's cold, so I will put it in the fridge. So I'll go off camera for a second, and I will continue with the cheese.
And so while Kuba's putting that in the fridge, I think this is one of the crucial parts here where the science helps us. And this is a really simple case, but we just note what the melting point of butter is. And so we know that actually, at cooler temperatures, it's solid. And that's why we can take advantage of that to get that nice crisp base by putting that base in the fridge. The melted butter solidifies and yeah, it will give us a lovely base for the cheesecake.
And actually, this is not like what we do in Chemical Kitchen. This is how most cheesecake bases are done. It's cookies with butter pressed together, and the taste of cookies with butter. I mean, it's better than cookies, definitely.
Now, one of the things, because I know people are multitasking, watching us and also doing their work on the stove, one of the things is to give the milk a stir periodically, because you can get, if you're not careful, a little bit of the milk burning on the bottom of the pan. So just giving it a gentle swirl every few minutes with a spoon or a spatula, whatever you have to hand, that will just stop the milk from burning.
Yes. And now the key to get a good, nice quality cheese for the cheesecake is to bring the milk to an appropriate temperature. And the easiest way, and that's what we're going to do, is we're going to bring it to boil. So we will see it rise up in the pot. And then we're going to take it off the heat, wait maybe a minute. And then we are going to add our coagulant. So it could be the lemon juice. We are going to make a fake lemon, or we do have lemons. So, well, let's do with citric acid. So the thing that makes the cheese coagulate the milk coagulate into cheese is the acid in the lemons. So you could use lemons, you could use vinegars, you could use tartaric acid, you could use cream of tartar. We are using citric acid, and that's the main acid in the lemon. That's actually what the component of the lemon that causes the milk to coagulate. So I have my little scale. I'm just going to weigh out 2 grams. Now, if you're using citric acid and you don't have a precise scale, well, 2 grams is like a flat teaspoon, basically. Let me check if that's precise enough. Well, actually, that's a little bit too much. So just to measure it in teaspoons, I guess it's about half of a teaspoon of citric acid. And again, that's precise enough for what we're doing. We just want to make the milk sour enough for the protein in the milk to clump together and create the cheese. Okay.
And so for anyone using lemons, I mean, do we have an idea of roughly how many lemons gives the appropriate amount of juice?
I would say 1 lemon should be enough. If it's a juicy lemon, then 1 lemon will be enough. If it's a dry lemon, sometimes it happens, maybe 2 lemons will be enough. Again, it's approximate. It's a nice flavor anyway. And I just wouldn't worry too much about the amount. If it's not enough, you will see the milk will not coagulate. It will not create the cheese. And then the simple solution is to squeeze another lemon and add more.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that's really, really important in science is close noticing and observation and documenting the results of the data you collect that you just use your senses with. So, of course, we make some proper measurements as well. But already I can just see Kuba had just taken the pot of milk off the stove and it was boiling. I probably would have taken a note of that in my lab notebook if I'd been doing this in a more formal setting. The other thing is that it's always good to take a note of the appearance of the materials you're working with. So right now we have this hot milk. It's a white colloid, but essentially a white suspension that we can't see through. And we're about to do something because we're about to add acid to it, whether that's lemon juice, whether that's citric acid. And so we want to look really carefully to take note of anything that happens, any change which occurs, because that's the level of detail that we need to include in the records of our practical experiment.
Yes, well, obviously you don't have to do it. For you, it's just about having some fun. But that's what we encourage, because this is an experiment that our students do when they first joined the chemistry department at Imperial. This is the actual experiment, the way we do it, that they do, and we require them to do certain things like noticing that Luke said.
And just before we move on, Kuba, I mean, could you say a little bit about what I know some people have brought their milk to a boil, but some people also are getting it to a discrete temperature. What would you say is a good temperature to bring the milk to so it's hot enough? So
I would say if you have a thermometer, bring it up to at least 80 degrees. A little bit higher is also fine. 85, 90, 95, that's fine. But 80, I would say, is the bare minimum. If you have it lower, then not all the protein will coagulate. And the higher it is, the more kind of compact the cheese will be, the less water it will have.
Brilliant.
Now, you're using lemon juice, so it's already a liquid. I have citric acid, so I'm just going to dissolve it in about 50 milliliters of water, just so when I add it to the milk, it mixes immediately rather than having to dissolve.
So making solutions is something that's really, really common in a lot of practical work, including in chemistry. And so the key thing here is knowing when everything is dissolved. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we move on to the agar experiment. But what Kuba's doing is he's swirling to encourage dissolution, and he's checking to see when all the solid particles have actually dissolved. So, I mean, this is no different than if you were making lemonade, let's say, and you were dissolving sugar. You'd be looking to see when all the solid sugar crystals have gone into solution to form a transparent solution.
Right. So this is all dissolved. I cannot see any crystals. I have good light here, so that's pretty good. So now to add the coagulant, I'm just going to give the milk a little bit of a swirl so it's all moving, so it encourages the mixing. I'm going to pour the citric acid all at once, give it another mix around the edges, and you can see an immediate change that the milk has coagulated. Maybe you could zoom in, look, with the camera, so we can show it a little bit more.
So I'm gonna
right.
zoom in there.
So you can see that it basically separated into something floating in a more transparent liquid than it was. And that's basically the cheese. That's how every cheese that you buy in a supermarket or anywhere else is made. You add something to milk and it separates the whey from the curd. And traditionally, making cheese is a very, very kind of old school thing. The people have been doing it for literally thousands of years. The first cheese that was discovered was from 3,000 years before our age, so 3,000 BC. And it has been done exactly like that. You had milk that went sour, it was heated up, and it created cheese. The advantage of cheese is that today we'll make kind of a very soft cheese. It will look kind of like ricotta, and that's not very durable. It cannot stay fresh for a very long time. But once you salt it and compact it more and dry it a little bit more, you can eat cheese that, or I am not saying that you should, but there are cases where people have eaten cheese that's hundreds years old and they're completely fine. It doesn't taste like cheese whatsoever, but it's still, the protein is preserved well enough for it to not be harmful. So we will leave it for a couple of minutes to kind of stabilize and coagulate fully. And while this is coagulating, Luke is going to prepare the topping, which is the agar jelly, and show you a couple of fun things he can do. So I'm just going to do a really quick cleanup to give him some space, and Luke will be here in literally a minute to start his experiment.
So while you're just clearing up there, Kuba, again, this is one of the things we spend a lot of time in our first year training our undergraduate chemists in, is keeping good laboratory records. So you're going to hear me going on about this a bit more. But I just wanted to repeat a little bit what Kuba was saying about what was happening in that pot with the milk that then had the acid added to it. And just in case anyone was wondering, we've been using two terms interchangeably. We've been using coagulant, which is the thing that's making the proteins coagulate. In this case, it's an acid. And so we've been using that interchangeably with acid. And what we started with was a uniform white colloid, the milk. And now we have a two-component mixture. So we have a yellow liquid, the whey, and then we have these white or off-white solid curds floating in that yellow liquid.
So maybe I can show the curd a little bit. Like now, if you see, I can fish out something that kind of looks like yogurt, I would say.
That's right. And so you couldn't have done that with the milk that we started with. So those are the kinds of details we'd want to capture as a record for our experiment.
And just as a note, this is ready to eat. If you want to eat warm milk curd, it's really delicious. And there are, 3 Michelin star restaurants that bring a little trolley to your table, have a pot with milk boiling, they add the acid, mix it, and then they serve it to you immediately. And it's considered very fancy. For me, it's not very fancy because it's something that I had, when I was a little kid. But yes, this is delicious already. But we are going to remove some of the water, flavor it, and make a cheesecake out of it. Anyway, I'll give space to Luke, and he will show you some tricks with agar.
So there you go for everyone listening today. You can be a Michelin star chef after this workshop. You'll have a little trick up your sleeve for dinner parties when you're entertaining. All right, I'm going to gather a few materials because we're going to be thinking about what the topping for the cheesecake is. Now, if you don't have agar, that's absolutely fine. You can always use some jam or some fruit that you can get creative. But we're just going to show it because, again, it illustrates some more scientific concepts behind cooking. So I have a little tray here. And so I have a slightly smaller measuring cylinder than the mammoth one that Kuba was using earlier. And again, I'm going to use a smaller pot for this, but this is what we're going to use to create our agar solution. Now, this is my agar. I've pre-weighed this. It's 6 grams of agar. If you're doing this at home, you'll be doing it on a smaller scale, so do follow the instructions in the manual. But we're going to be making a 2% solution, so I'll use 6 grams in 300 milliliters of liquid. So I've chosen to use a wonderful concentrated summer fruit squash because it's going to give me a really nice intense flavor. But you can use anything you like. You could use fresh fruit juice, flavored teas that you've brewed yourself and sugared yourself. I think the key thing is you want quite a strong flavor. So you do want a nice concentrate. You do want to maybe add some sugar. Some people add some tartness as well. If they like a tart topping, you can add a bit of lime juice or something like that. It's anything to your taste. And we can then form a vegetarian jelly using agar to actually form that gel. So I'm going to measure out 300 milliliters of my aqueous solution. So aqueous just meaning it's water-based, like the squash. And I'm going to pour that in there and get it approximately to 300 milliliters.
So look, maybe you can say what's so unusual about agar and why we are using agar and not gelatin, and what you could do with agar that you cannot do with gelatin.
I think the key thing that's interesting is the effects of temperature on the agar gels. But I'm actually going to call on Kuba to tell us a little bit more about that with his biology background, which uses agar quite a lot.
Right. So that's a big difference between chemistry and biology laboratories. And the big difference is that in biology laboratories, you use agar every day. So dissolving agar, maybe not in a squash, but in a different solution is something you do pretty much every day when you work in biology, in experimental biology. And you don't actually use the property that I'm going to talk about in biology, but in restaurants, the nice property about agar is that it solidifies at about 30 degrees, but if you want to remelt it again, it melts at about 80 degrees. So you can make a jelly with even a savory flavor, and then heat it up and serve a warm jelly, which is very unusual and not achievable with anything else than agar, or very few ingredients other than agar.
So that's some homework for anyone who wants to try a warm jelly for dessert. You can play around with agar, available from many supermarkets and online. I'm going to add now, so I have my cold squash that I've put in my pot, which looks like an oversized teacup. That's a proper size cup of tea there. And I'm going to add my fine powder to my cold liquid and just give it a little bit of a stir. Now I'm going to use a whisk to give it a bit of a stir, but you can use a spoon, whatever you have on hand. I just want to combine it a little bit before I put it on the heat.
Yeah, that's key as well, because if you put the agar in hot liquid, it will clump. So basically it will create like a little membrane on the outside and basically create, you won't dissolve properly.
Now, we talked a little bit earlier about making solutions. And so Kuba made a solution quite easily by dissolving citric acid in water just by swirling. And it dissolved because the solubility of citric acid in water is very high. Of course, depending on the solid, the solubility can be very, very different. And one of the things that we can do to help something dissolve is to increase the temperature of the solvent. So in this case, I'm actually trying to dissolve the agar, and so that the water-based solution is my solvent. And I want to increase the temperature because the agar is not very soluble. So by bringing this mixture to a boil, I increase the solubility of agar so I can form that nice solution when all those solid granules have disappeared. And that's really important because the jelly won't form unless I'd formed that uniform solution. So I'm going to occasionally stir this, and that's crucial. But essentially, it's not going to dissolve until it's at the boil for maybe about a minute. So it will take some time, but I have a nice preheated hot plate here, so hopefully it won't take too long. And any solid that's stuck on the sides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my spatula just to push that solid back down into solution so that it actually dissolves.
So we have a question from Klina. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Do you get agar from normal supermarkets? If you don't have it, are there any substitutes? And is vegetarian jelly, for example, similar to agar? And just to answer it, yes, you can get it from normal supermarkets, big brand supermarkets. I'm not going to name them, but the ones that start with W or S or T, they do have agar. Usually you can find it in the Oriental or Asian aisle, or maybe even the organic one. Many brands are organic. You can get agar there. We get our agar from the internet because we buy it a little bit in bulk for all the students, but you can also buy smaller amounts online. So it is easily available. Also all kind of Asian far East Asian shops will have agar because it's a very common ingredient there. If you don't have it for the purpose of this, you could use jam. You could use gelatin as well, the pork gelatin, or any other gelling agent. The vegetarian, I know that supermarkets sell something that's called vegetarian gelatin, and this is sometimes not exactly agar. Sometimes it's a mix of few gelling agents, but it will work definitely. So again, any vegetarian gelling agents are quite good. They don't all have this behavior that they melt at a higher temperature that they set at, but it will work for what we are doing here, definitely.
Excellent. So I'm going to give you a little preview of what I'm going to be doing with this agar, because essentially when it's all dissolved, I'm going to have this hot solution. And we're going to exploit the property of agar that when it cools, it's going to solidify to give a nice firm but flexible jelly. So I'm going to do two things with this today. I have a metal tray, and I'm actually going to pour a small sheet of that hot solution onto the tray, which as it cools is going to solidify. And that will allow us to kind of cut nice shapes out of it to help with the decoration of our dishes. So I'll show you that. The other trick I'm going to do is something that's really cool, is I'm going to form essentially fake caviar using this flavored solution. So if I drop individual droplets of this hot solution into this cold oil bath, then I'll be able to form lovely, flavorful little glossy spheres. Now, all I've done here is I've taken some vegetable oil and I've put it in this glass dish, but you could put it in a mug or any other dish you have at home, and I've stuck it in the freezer to get it nice and cold. And that's a nice little trick that we'll show you. So I'm just going to grab a syringe that I'm going to use to actually drop the liquid. But any kind of dropping implement you have, like a baster or anything like that, will also work. But again, this is kind of one of these so-called molecular gastronomy techniques, and so you can find a lot of these droppers and so on online very easily. So I'm going to actually just use, instead of a syringe, one of these, just a small little dropping pipette. And that's boiling very vigorously, which is good, but I've caught it in time. So that's the key thing. You always need to keep an eye on the stove when you're doing something, and in the lab. And I'm just going to get a heat-proof mat.
Yes, and just to kind of say a little bit about the syringes and pipettes, it might sound like an unusual thing that you can get, but I think you can get syringes without needles in pharmacies, basically. Or again online. I mean, you can get anything online, but you can get these syringes or these little pipettes. They're often used in kind of hobby and craft, and they're readily available to use, basically.
Yeah. So I just want to boil it a little bit more just to make sure it's all dissolved. But you'll know when it's done. I mean, I can see that all the solid from my agar powder has disappeared, which means that it's dissolved. And this is actually ready to work with. I'm just being a little overly cautious to make sure it's all fully dissolved.
And that's, I think, a very good thing, because you cannot over-dissolve agar. You could actually boil it. That's how agar is made. It's being boiled out of seaweed for hours. And you could boil it for a very long time, and it will not affect the gelling of agar. It won't be like that with gelatin. The more you boil gelatin, the weaker it becomes. But with agar, it's actually good to boil it for a good minute or two on a rolling boil to make sure that it's really, really dissolved.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cast my sheet that I mentioned, because that's integral to our plans with the dish we've designed earlier that we're looking to reveal to you later. So I'm literally just going to let that boil subside for a couple seconds, and then I'm going to carefully pour it onto my dish. So I'm just going to pour that there, and just make sure we have a thin layer that covers the whole dish. I'll give it a little tilt to make sure it's covered all the angles. And the next time that I hold this up and show it to you, I promise you it will all be solid, and it will be able to be used with cookie cutters and the like. Now I'm going to take a dropping pipette. I'm going to take up a little bit of the hot liquid, and I'm going to carefully add, drop by drop, this hot mixture into my cold oil. So it solidifies quite quickly on contact with the cold oil because the temperature drops rapidly. Now, this is another thing where I think there's good parallels to the world of science. I spent a lot of my PhD adding things carefully, drop-wise, to my reaction mixtures. So it's about that control. It sounds simple, but it takes practice to get that control of applying the right pressure so it doesn't squirt out all at once, but rather you get a controlled drop-wise addition. I can also control the size of the spheres, because if I drop several drops on the same point in the oil, I get slightly bigger spheres, which as they get heavier, sink down through the viscous oil and go down to the bottom. Or if I just drop a single drop, it forms a smaller sphere. And so having that variety of sizes is quite nice for the plating. Also, the other thing is you could, if you started with a colorless solution, you could split the hot solution. You could add different colors and flavorings and have multicolored spheres. So this is a really, really versatile technique. And I'd encourage anyone interested in doing some creative cooking to consider agar as a really, really versatile reagent that you can really get some impressive results with quite easily.
Yeah, so and again, because agar, now we solidify it in a very, very cold oil. But again, you can heat it up pretty much to 70 degrees without it melting. You know, you could, for example, think about making little cranberry spheres for Christmas and putting them through your turkey gravy and having a little pops of fruit through the gravy in a very kind of unusual way. You know, when you put these kind of colorful red spheres in a brown gravy, once you put it on a plate, the spheres pop out, and it looks very, very beautiful.
Absolutely. So again, you can think of all kinds of things, or you could do a kind of modernist salad dressing. You can think of balsamic acid, spheres as a garnish to a salad, all kinds of things. So I think I'll stop there. And some of you may be wondering, but how are you going to separate the spheres out of the oil? Well, basically what I'm going to do, which I'll do off screen, is I'm going to pass this whole mixture through a sieve. So that will let the liquid oil through, but catch my spheres on the top. And then I'll collect them in a little bowl, which I'll just need to rinse them with a little water to get rid of the excess oil. But it's a really, really easy technique to do. My cast gel is cooling slowly. And actually, what's left in the pot, that's going to cool and solidify too. Now, really, really important point. Because agar, when it cools, forms that solid gel, it's really important not to put liquid agar down the drains because it will solidify in the drains and clog them. So please wait until the agar has cooled. And if you have any excess unused solid agar, that can just go in the general waste bin.
Right. Or another thing you could do with solid agar is put it in the fridge and remelt it, because you can remelt it as many times as you want. So while Luke is taking care of this, I'm going to just strain the cheese. So it has been coagulating for long enough. So again, you can see now even better that there are two layers. There's the solid white layer on the top and a more liquid kind of yellowish layer on the bottom. And this yellow color is not because of the lemon juice. When we use citric acid, which is colorless, this is actually how whey from cow's milk looks like. It's a little bit yellow, and that's because of the vitamin B that's in the milk. And because it became transparent, you can actually see it right now. Okay, so I have my big beaker. You could use a bowl, you could use a pot, you could even do it directly over a sink, but I think it's better to do it over something. And I have a little strainer and a cheesecloth. Now, if I didn't have a strainer, I would just kind of tie the cheesecloth around the beaker, but it's easier with a strainer, so I recommend that. I'm just going to carefully tip over everything from the pot onto the cheesecloth. There's going to be a little bit of spilling, but that's fine because we are prepared and we have a cloth, so we can wipe everything immediately. And you can see that's draining quite rapidly, and that's in the beginning it will drain very quickly, but it will slow down. So normally what we would do is we would tie all these corners together and hang it and let it kind of hang overnight and drain all the liquid. We are going to just help it a little bit by squeezing it with hand once it's a little bit more cooler, so we don't burn ourselves.
Absolutely. We had a question in the chat about the cold oil verification, and it was about if we had any tips for what type of oil would be good to use for it.
I would say just normal plain vegetable oil. You don't want the oil to be flavored in any way. You don't want to use olive oil. You don't want to use any kind of cold pressed oil. Just any kind of vegetable oil. I think we are using sunflower oil, but soybean oil, corn oil, or whatever other oils, rapeseed oil, that's perfect. Anything that doesn't really have much flavor, it's perfect.
Absolutely, and we have a comment from another one of our participants saying that instead of agar, they're using stewed apple and raspberry as a topping, and that sounds lovely.
That sounds delicious.
And if anyone else would like to share what they're thinking about using as the topping for their cheesecake, please do pop your comments in the chat. Really, really great to hear from you all, and so pleased that we have so many of you working along with us today.
Now, I just had an idea to show one more small thing with agar. I have a little gummy bear mold, and we're going to make some gummy bears to put on top of the cheesecake. So again, it's easier with the pipette or syringe. If you have a small mold, you could use a bigger mold. You could cast it in anything because it will take the shape of the container and solidify, and then you can pop it out and have any shape. So I'm just going to kind of drop the agar into the mold, and then we're going to sit some of these gummy bears on top of our final dessert. And again, this is, I do it pretty much effortlessly, but it takes a bit of practice to have a steady hand and be able to do things without spilling or just precisely. Now, sometimes when you have agar, you pour agar with the pipette, you have little air bubbles. You can just kind of touch them with your finger, and it should pop them, or you can suck them up with the pipette.
So again, we're seeing here how versatile an ingredient agar is here. We have 3 different forms now of jelly that we're making. We've used, as I said, the summer fruits flavor throughout all of this. If anyone else at home is using agar, we'd be really, really keen to hear what you used as your flavorful liquid to actually make your jelly, because there's just endless possibilities, and we found with our students, they're so creative and come up with such wonderful flavorful mixtures. So please do share what you've used for your flavorful liquid. We also have another question, Kuba, relating to the cheese, which is that we have this liquid dripping through, and it's a question about whether that might be able to be used for something.
Yes. So I would say that traditionally, which means probably 50, 100 years ago, people would just drink it. It's actually tastes like a very, very light version of yogurt. It's quite flavorful, especially when it's chilled. If you live in the countryside, you can feed it to your pigs. And because that's usually what happens when there's a big cheese making factory. They sell the whey to farmers to feed the livestock, because it's pretty nutritious. It has lots of vitamins, it has some sugars, it has some protein as well. There are recipes where you use it in bread instead of water, and that makes a lovely bread as well, with some acidity and kind of milky flavors, which is always nice in bread. And I would say that's pretty much it. You could also make a cheese that's called ricotta, and that's by mixing the whey with a little bit of fresh milk and coagulating it again. It coagulates just kind of slightly different types of proteins than. There are many recipes for traditional ricotta on the internet, so I won't go too deep into it. But it is something that you don't have to throw out. It's actually a valuable, still a valuable liquid in a way.
Now, I'm not sure if I'm misremembering, but did you have a fun fact about the liquid, Kuba?
Oh yeah, there is a fun fact. If you happen to make cheese at in a club at a party, and there are UV lights, this will all glow in UV. So that's because the vitamin B is actually fluorescent in UV light. So if you shine UV light, like the one that you use to check banknotes or documents, this will glow with a nice kind of greenish yellow glow, which would be cool to show, but we don't have a UV light, unfortunately. But if you're making a party at home and you're making some fresh cheese to put with your dessert, and again, these fresh curds would be great, like with poached peaches or poached pears. This kind of combination, you can just turn off the lights, turn on the UV light, and make a great show with.
I was even thinking sort of a little party ring with this curd cheese and maybe crushed pineapple and walnuts. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? Very kind of festive for the season.
Yeah, it's a very delicate flavor. It's basically tastes of milk. It's very milky, but it's a little bit more concentrated, and it has like this nice soft kind of texture.
Great. I think we're going to move on now to
with the agar caviar.
Yeah, so I'll get the agar spheres going, but I think there may be some.
I'm going to prepare for the plating then, and show some tricks with fruit. All good?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So as I said, I'm going to plate two different cheesecakes. One is going to be looking more like a traditional kind of mini cake you could get in a pastry shop, and one will look more like a plated dessert that you could probably find in a restaurant. So for this, again, this is our plate with the cookie crumb base, and the crumb base is now solid because the butter has solidified in the cold fridge. And I'm just going to line it with the blueberries. So this is the simple part. So maybe, you can zoom in. I'm just going to slice them in half. And I'm going to line them on the kind of diameter, circumference of the circle. So if you take a look, they are on the side of the metal, and I'm just going to go all the way around.
So then we had another question in the chat about, how long to heat the liquid for, and I think that was in relation to heating up the agar mixture. So I think the key thing is it's bring it to the boil, so when it's bubbling, and then once it's boiling, I'd say 1 to 2 minutes.
1 to 2 minutes boiling, yeah. So this requires a little bit of precision, but I will show you another way to cut a blueberry that requires even more precision, and that we will put on top of our desserts.
Absolutely. And so while you're layering those blueberries, Kuba, we had another question relating to the yield of the cheese. I think for some people, maybe there was a bit less precipitating out. And we find that's usually linked to the temperature that the milk was brought to. So sometimes if you can get that milk right up to boiling, then you get a much higher yield of the cheese. But you know, any amount of cheese that you're able to isolate is great, and we'll show you how to mix that with sugar and form the filling for the cheesecake. But it could be just that it wasn't hot enough.
Right. So this is all line. I'm not going to show it to you because it's going to collapse, but I'm going to prepare the cheesecake filling. And because we have such nice fresh cheese that has all these kind of fresh milky flavors, I'm not going to do too much to it. I'm just going to put on gloves because it's still a little bit warm and wet. So I just feel a little bit better doing it in gloves. But you don't have to do it. You can just wait a little bit longer until it's more cool, and then it's safe to handle. I mean, now it's safe as well. And normally I would leave this cheese hanging like that in the fridge over a bowl overnight, and it would do what I'm going to do now manually, which is kind of get rid of the rest of the water from inside. Now I have to be careful not to squeeze too much, because I will squeeze the cheese through the cheesecloth. But I'm just going to make sure it's thick enough for our purposes. And yeah, I can see I'm squeezing out the cheese itself now, so I'm just going to give a delicate squeeze again. I'm going to just unravel the cheese from the cloth, and we have a very, very nice curd. You know, it starts to look kind of like ricotta. Pop it in the bowl, and to kind of preserve this nice milky flavor, the only thing I'm going to do with the cheese, I'm going to just sweeten it with some custard sugar. So I think for this amount, and of course this depends on your taste, but I think for this amount, 2 flat or maybe 2.5 teaspoons of sugar is good. I'm going to taste it, of course. I'm just going to mix it until it forms a nice paste.
While you're mixing that, Kuba, we have another question I might draw on your chef knowledge, which is what's the difference between arrowroot and agar?
Well, chemically, not too much, because both are like long chain carbohydrates. So those are little sugar molecules connected into long chains. Arrowroot is more like cornstarch. So if you add it and heat it up, it will create like a gel that's like a paste. Agar creates a solid gel that's more, well, it's solid. It doesn't flow anymore. Arrowroot will just thicken things.
Yeah. So not a replacement for agar in these experiments.
No, but still nice to use. Okay, so this is mixed. I'm just going to give it a little taste. And that's, again, very milky and sweet. I'm just going to get my tools from the side. So again, we have our special spoon that's bent, very important tool. I'm just going to put the cheese in the mold here. I'm going to press it down a little bit to create a kind of nice layer. And once maybe it doesn't make too much sense right now, but once I lift the ring, you will see what I have done, and all will be clear, I hope. It's a shame we don't have a transparent ring. That would be easier.
I'm sure
we can ask our glass blowing people to make one for us. That's the advantage of working in the chemistry department.
Yeah.
So again, this is all going to be apparent what I'm doing in a second. But I'm just going to press it down again, like I did with the cookie crumb.
So as a reminder for everyone, in the bottom of that ring is, of course, our cookie base. I'd be interested to hear if anyone has done anything different with their base at home. So we've used digestive biscuits, but I wonder if anyone else might have used other flavor biscuits. We've had some creative students who've done some really cool things with the base. So really interested to hear if anyone has a variation on the theme today.
Yeah, but as you can see, this looks like a pack of cheese. But once we remove the ring, it will look a little bit different. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use another ring to cut a little silk circle from the agar that Luke has prepared. And I'm going to lift it. And you can see it's a nice kind of, it looks like a transparent piece of plastic.
Yeah.
But it's actually tastes of the fruit that the squash is made out of, allegedly. Okay, and I'm just going to place it on in the middle and kind of press it down very slightly to make sure it adheres to the cheese. And this will hold everything together when I remove the ring.
And just before you extract the pie, I wonder if you could just hold up the tray for us, Kuba, to show that solid layer now of jelly. So you see, we were able to just use that circular mold to cut out a shape, and yeah, the jelly is perfectly solid and stuck there. So we had a hot, free-flowing liquid that solidified.
Yeah. So now I'm just going to use my fingers to kind of push on the edges when I pull the ring out. And this is what we get. So you can see we have the base that we had in the beginning on the bottom. We have the blueberries that I arrange around the perimeter, and we have the jelly on top. And now I'm going to start with the other plating, and then we're going to garnish the rest with a little bit of other things. And I will show you how to cut the blueberries in a very fancy way. We have 10 minutes, so I think that's good enough in terms of time. Okay, so I'm just going to use our cookies with butter to make a little base on the plate, and we're going to zoom in on the dishes once we're done. And you know, this is just a kind of improvisation. I don't have a plan how I'm going to plate it.
So your artistic juices are flowing, Kuba.
Exactly. I'm very excited, and
so we have someone that's used ginger biscuits to make the base.
Oh, delicious!
That sounds amazing, and I think really lovely flavor for this time of year. That nice warm, spicy ginger base. That sounds great. You're making me hungry.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Lara asking about what kind of liquids you could use to make the agar. Is there anything apart from juices and concentrates?
I would say anything that's water-based. So obviously you cannot dissolve agar in oil or in chocolate. And again, chocolate solidifies on its own. So
it could even be things like vegetable purees, and I think
yes,
as long as you want it a nice kind of smooth liquid, of course, so that you could stir it and dissolve the agar. But
tea, coffee would be very nice. You know, you could do a nice Irish coffee. The only thing I would suggest is that the liquid, you know, it's like with gummy bears. Again, if you have gummy bears, the liquid is actually very, very sweet and very intense in flavor. Because when you taste the liquid before solidifying, it tastes much more intense than the jelly. So the jelly should have an intense flavor, and if it's a fruit jelly or something that's supposed to be sweet, it has to be like sweet, really sweet. So now I'm just doing like a little technique that's very common in kitchens. It's called quenelling. So I have 2 spoons of equal size. I take a little bit of cheese. I kind of take it from one spoon to the other, and I create a nice kind of oval, well, 3-sided oval shape. I just put it on the plate, and it's just a nice way to present any kind of stuff like that. You know, even when you have a cheese board and you have some kind of thick chutney, you can do nice quenelles, and it looks very professional and impressive. And then we're going to add this jelly, and I'm just going to cut little long strips, so kind of narrow long strips of it that's similar to pasta. Now if you want a nice straight edge, you would use a ruler, but because we're going to kind of fold them around, we don't really need to care about that too much.
I was just thinking of that earlier question we had, Kuba, about the yield of the cheese, and so temperature is one of the factors. The other thing I suppose to check for if you're attempting this at another time is the amount of acid. So maybe you need to add a little bit more lemon juice or a little bit more vinegar, depending on what you're using.
Right, and again, we have strained this, and if this liquid is not like yellow and kind of transparent, but it's very milky, looks like milk, what you can do is you can reheat it and add more lemon.
Yeah.
And you will get more cheese. So again, another strip. Here, we're going to sit a gummy bear on top of the tart. with some of the caviar, and then I'm going to show what everybody's waiting for, the fancy blueberry cut. Right? So, is it zoomed in now? No, okay. So I think zoom in will be useful just because it's a very precise method. So you want to choose a nice big plump blueberry. I mean, you can do it with small ones, but it's just easier with a firm and big one. And you have to hold your knife in a very unusual way. So you hold it between your 3 fingers here, and you only use the very tip of it. I hold the blueberry between fingers here. I'm just going to kind of insert it at an angle here. And what I'm going to do next, take it out, rotate the knife 90 degrees, and kind of start making a zigzag pattern around.
So just to repeat that, essentially you're piercing that blueberry, so just with a stick of the knife, but changing the angle of the knife with each one to make that up, down, zigzag pattern.
And you kind of pierce it, eyeballing, so kind of the tip of the knife, if I take it out now and put it here, it goes to the middle. You don't pierce it all the way through. So it takes a little bit of practice, but it's actually easier than it looks. And I'm just going to go all the way around. And at some point they should meet. Sometimes they don't meet very nicely, but you have to improvise a little bit. And then once I take it apart, you can see you get like a nice little kind of crown pattern on the blueberry. So I'm just going to put this on top of the tart. I'm going to do a couple more so you can see it again. And these kinds of knife skills are common in the kitchens, but right now we are developing a module for medicine students, people who do precise procedures with needles or scalpels, and they will create different shapes out of vegetables and mushroom to train kind of their manual skills in a slightly different context, because when you go to a slightly different context, you can notice more things than if you concentrate on your discipline. At least that's what we think happened. So we have the little blueberries here. I'm going to put a few more here. I'm going to make one more.
And so while you're cutting that last one, Kuba, because I know we're wrapping up these dishes now, we had a question about anyone who wanted to make the baked version of the cheesecake, and just if we had an estimate of how long that one should be in the oven for.
There are so many factors, like the thickness of the cheesecake or your oven as well. I would say until it's no longer wobbly, which is, I guess, an instruction that you get along with a lot with the tarts. But I would say if you have a cheesecake that's about this thick and you bake it at 160 degrees, I would probably check it about 30 minutes after putting it in the oven, maybe 45 minutes. But again, it would have to be something that you check yourself. And if it's not wobbly, if it cools down, it will be baked. Again, in the filled cheesecake, you have the cheese, you have the eggs, all these things are okay to eat once they reach 60 degrees. So it's not really a problem.
Excellent. And one last question, which is really interesting, which is about the question about whether you could use nut milks to make some kind of curds.
To make cheese. Yes. So there are vegan cheeses made based on cashew milk or other nut milks. The techniques are a little bit different for those, and again, I would refer you to resources on the internet. And there are a lot of resources on the internet about how to make cheese from nut milks and how to make actually cheeses that are even more like the cheeses you would buy in a cheese shop, like Roquefort or other Blue Mold cheeses. And nowadays there are more and more shops that actually offer these for sale. You can just go into a shop and buy a nut milk based cheese, but it is quite easy to do at home. But again, it's a little bit of a different technique than for tofu or for cow's milk cheese.
Brilliant. Well, I was just going to zoom in, Kuba, on your wonderful creation such that our audience could have a look. And then I can't believe how the time's flown so quickly, because we'll be handing back to our moderators to wrap up the session. But I'm just going to zoom in there.
Yes, you need to tilt a little bit with our...
And so you can see that lovely array of blueberries along the sides of that dish that we were able to achieve using the mold. And then what I would call a modernist interpretation of a cheesecake. On the left-hand side, that ribbon cut from that sheet of flat agar that we cast earlier, those beautiful quenelles of our sweetened cheese curds, and then the lovely garnishes with blueberries and mint. And I think, you know, something that we achieve so quickly can be so impressive. And so I hope all of you are able to impress your friends and family with some newly acquired cooking skills from Imperial College Great Exhibition Road Festival. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fabulous. And I'll just let Kuba say thanks and goodbye to both of us.
Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. And yeah, I hope you, if you haven't done so already, I hope you try to do this at home. And yeah, again, I hope you enjoyed our workshop.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. And
Thank you.
Over to you, Holly.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Luke and Jakob, and thank you everyone who has joined us today. We really hope that you had fun. We'd love to see your creations. Did you go traditional or deconstructed with your cheesecake, or did you do both? So please share pictures with us on Twitter and Instagram at #ExhibitionRoadFestival. A recording of this cook-along will soon appear on the Great Exhibition Road Festival YouTube account for you to watch again or share with your friends. Also, please remember to download the recipe book that is in the description so that you can print it off, keep it in your kitchen, and make this again. A link will soon be posted in the chat to an evaluation form where you can tell us what you thought of this event. So please take a couple of minutes to fill this in. It is really useful for us going forward. Otherwise, it just remains for me to thank Jakob and Luke again and thank you for tuning in. That's it from me. Have a lovely Saturday, everyone.